The Dallas Mavericks are a renowned franchise with decades of success to show for it. In 2011, they became the 8th team in NBA history to win an NBA championship with just one All-Star. And a lot of people will say that they had the hardest path to an NBA championship in NBA history. This franchise has had multiple Hall of Famers walk throughout those locker rooms. In the 90s, it was Jason Kidd. In the early 2000s, it was Steve Nash. And for the last 25 or so years prior to his retirement, it was the German Jesus, Dirk Nowitzki. And then the Mavericks got lucky again. Right when Dirk had flirted with retirement, they were able to add yet another Hall of Fame talent in the draft, trading for the rights of Luka Doncic in the 2018 NBA draft. Immediately coming into the league, you could see Luka's never before seen basketball abilities. He was an instant 20-point per game scorer and flirts with a triple-double on a nightly basis. Each year, he seems to always outdo himself, and last season was his most successful one, reaching the Western Conference Finals before ultimately perishing to the eventual NBA champions. What's even crazier about Luka's game is that despite how incredible he is in the regular season, he's always able to turn it up another notch come playoff time. In 28 playoff appearances, Luka's dropping 32.5 points per game on great efficiencies. Might I add, he's done so without a steady second option. And see, that right there is my issue with the Dallas Mavericks. It's that they haven't been able to give Luka that steady second star that a lot of these other teams have. We can go down the list, just starting off in the Western Conference. LeBron James has Anthony Davis. Stephen Curry has the multitude of players like Jordan Poole, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Andrew Wiggins, and it's more of a collective unit, but we see how talented that team is. The Clippers, Kawhi Leonard has Paul George. Zion Williamson has Brandon Ingram. Nikola Jokic has Jamal Murray coming back. The list just goes on and on and on. And when we look at the Mavericks, it's Luka, and previously it was Kristaps Porzingis. Now I get it. Luka's just entering his 5th season, and he's only 23 years old, and the Mavericks have been aggressive, as they were in getting Kristaps Porzingis, but you can argue that that move was a little premature. The move costed them 2 first-round picks, as well as an assortment of other players, for a player coming off a season-ending injury. And for a player like Kristaps Porzingis, that ACL injury really derailed his career. And there were other reasons, but ultimately, Kristaps and Luka just didn't work together. Now on the flip side, I get it that Luka is young, but now is your time to capitalize off that. It's time now to take advantage of that, build on that, and create a decade plus of success. I look around the Western Conference and see these other powerhouse teams, and can the Mavericks really compete with them? Can they compete with the new look Clippers? Can they compete with the Warriors? How about the Pelicans? The Lakers? Nuggets? I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I'm sure there's a couple teams that I'm missing as well. Are the Mavericks contenders, or are they pretenders? Let's get into it. So to really dive deep into this, we have to look at the roster and what they have. Now, they lost Jalen Brunson this offseason, which is a big loss for them. After a successful playoff run, he signed with the New York Knicks for a 4-year, $100 and something million deal, something crazy like that. I want to say a couple seasons ago, the Mavericks could have offered Jalen Brunson a 4-year, $44 million extension, and it declined. They were hesitant on making that deal, and in turn, Jalen Brunson bet on itself, and it worked. They replaced his production with the trade for Christian Wood. Now, of course, these two players play 2 different positions, but I'd like to say that Christian Wood is better offensively as of right now than Jalen Brunson is. I feel like that'll probably turn by the end of next season, but for this case, we'll go with that. Now, it essentially took nothing for the Mavericks to get Christian Wood, but I don't know if that's more of a negative than a positive, because when we look at Christian Wood's game, he's never been a winning player, and he just doesn't try on defense. He's fantastic offensively, a great sharpshooter for a 6'9" guy. Rebounding numbers are always good. He's a solid scorer, a really, really good scorer, actually. And if there was a team that could help him defensively, it is the Mavericks in Jason Kidd's system. I'm intrigued to see how he fits alongside Luka. He has an off-ball game as well as being able to play on-ball. He can be a lob threat or he can pick and pop. I mean, he's extremely versatile, and there's many different ways that he can score the basketball. And I feel like that's exactly what the Mavericks need. And it's not like he's going to be playing center like in years past, because the Mavericks made the decision to sign Javale Mcgee. Now, I feel like this move went real under the radar, but this is one of the best moves that we had this offseason. Javale Mcgee brings a lot for the Mavericks, and considering they made a Western Conference Finals run with Dwight Powell as a starting center for them, just imagine what they can do with Javale Mcgee. He's a great rim runner. He's an amazing shot blocker. He's a great paint presence. I mean, he's exactly what they need. And it's great for them because over the last few seasons, Javale Mcgee has been a 25 minutes per game guy. And with the addition of Christian Wood, as well as having Maxi Kleber coming off the bench, he can still be that. But what about the mainstays? You know, the guys that have already been on the team? Well, first we got to talk about Dorian Finney-Smith, who really came into his own last season. I like Dorian Finney-Smith. He's a great 3-and-D guy. But again, I feel like he is what he is at this point in his career. Dorian Finney-Smith is 29, going to be 30 by the time the playoffs start next year, so I don't really see him getting too much better than what he was last season. There's also Spencer Dinwiddie, who's likely to be the starting point guard of this team, Now, I don't know how I feel about Spencer Dinwiddie. You know, he had some great years in Brooklyn, but I feel like that's in the past for him now. He started off really hot for the Washington Wizards and then really dipped down. Now, you can blame injuries and such for that, but another guy who I believe is just the player that he is. Spencer Dinwiddie is always going to be inefficient. You know, he's always going to be a shot checker. He's not going to play too much defense, so I'm interested to see what he's able to do as a starter next season. Davis Bertans will probably have more of a defined role for this team moving forward. There's also Josh Green and Frank Ntilikina who bring a defensive pedigree for this team, young players who should receive spot minutes here and there. So when you break it down like that, it does sound good, but at the same time, once we get into the playoffs where teams are really hunkering down and adjusting, you're going to need other guys to step up. And can we really count on Christian Wood to step up in his first ever playoff appearance? Potentially. How much can we count on Spencer Dinwiddie? How much can we count on Tim Hardaway Jr.? When I look at it from afar, this team is eerily similar to the one that LeBron James had in his early years in Cleveland. It was LeBron James surrounded with defense, just like Luka is now. There was no steady second option, there was a defensive-minded head coach, and ultimately they faltered in the playoffs. And we know what happened after that, but again, I don't think Luka's gonna look to bolt, out of Dallas after just 5, 6, 7 seasons. But once again, going back to those other teams that are gonna be healthy in the Western Conference, that have gotten better in the Western Conference, I just don't see the Mavericks making a run like they made last year. I don't want to say they're pretenders as of right now because when you have Luka Doncic on your team, you're always going to be a contender. But I wouldn't be surprised if this was a first-round exit team. Look, man, Luka just can't do it all. And I really feel like the Mavericks got to get creative. They got to get aggressive in their moves to add more talent to the team. But when we look at the roster, what are their biggest assets? It starts with Davis Bertans, who essentially has a year left on his deal after this season, as his last year isn't fully guaranteed. Spencer Dinwiddie is another contract that isn't fully guaranteed for next year, so he could be another player on the move. You got young assets like Jaden Hardy, who I hadn't really touched on, which is a great draft pick for them, and Josh Green, who you could look to move as well some picks, one of those big contracts, and some pick swaps to entice deals. Look, in today's NBA, it's as easy as it's ever been to acquire star players. The Mavericks have to capitalize on that. But at the end of the day, they have Luka under contract for 5 more seasons, and he hasn't shown any signs of frustrations. He's going to play at an MVP level and probably win a couple of them over that time, so it's literally nothing to worry about. The Mavericks will probably be fine, and in due time, they'll probably make that splash move that will put them over the top. Like, is that the conclusion that I came with? I spent all this time in the video talking about how they were pretenders, and now I'm saying that they'll be fine? I'm just rambling on, man. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. Luka's a god. Go Mavericks.